the military interventions. So military interventions are single instances, military interventions, coup attempts, or like other manifestations of military influence. These are like the single instances, but what I'm trying to explain is overall, general, and more lengthy military influence in the Middle East. What I'm trying to do, I'll drive my lessons from a couple of countries, from states from the Middle East. First of all, Tunisia, Algeria, Pakistan. Pakistan is not in the Middle East, but think of it as like a greater Middle East. But I'll also talk about like Malaysia to bring in some like another country from outside the region, and I'll talk about Egypt as well. So, in the beginning, I should say that democratization in the Middle East. When we talked about like for so long time about democratization in the Middle East, we equated democratization with the posing removal of authoritarian leaders. Like we thought if Mubarak was deposed, then we would have democracy in Egypt. That was thinking like pretty much. But obviously, like after the Arab Spring and now like the coup in Egypt and what has been happening in Syria, now we know that wasn't the case at all. Like we could get rid of Ben Ali in Yemen, we could get rid of Assad. We couldn't, but we could if we could, or we could get rid of like Mubarak, but we still like would have the army. Army remained. So that was the main one of the main obstacles. I think like for so long we missed that point. And like I need to talk about like the academic interest in militaries in the region as well. So from 1950s to 1970s, scholars, academics, they were all interested in armies, Middle Eastern armies, Arab armies, because then many scholars thought if you want to understand Arab politics, then you need to understand military, because they were the single most influential actor in Middle Eastern politics. But after 1970s, like from the beginning of 1970 actually, then we have this much cherished era of stability in the region. Like I'm sure like many of you have read articles on the Middle East, like by Western scholars and academics, and they all will tell you stability in the region was important because oil was important first of all, and then the rise of political Islam. So people, academics, scholars, professionals, and even policymakers, they focused on the rise of political Islam, oil, but not militaries anymore, because then we had towards the end of 1970s, we have now Mubarak in Egypt, and then we had towards the end of 1980s, we have Ali Abdullah Saleh in Yemen, and we have Hafez Assad, the Assad family in Syria. So we have all these authoritarian leaders which control, because they are very good at coup proofing, because they know how to make a coup and they take precautions that, like as they enforce these precautions, then we have stability in the region. So we don't have any more coups, like we don't see coups. But from 1950s to 70s, we have like many coup attempts and coups in the region, in Iraq, in Egypt. Like you would be surprised, but there was even during Nasser, there was a conflict between Abdul Hakim Amir and Nasser. So like from that time, from the rise of stability until 2010, Arab Spring, we don't have much, or like compared to the period before, we don't have many scholarly works on militaries in the region. But with the Arab Spring, like everyone collected, and everyone was caught off guard, because they really didn't know what happened to the military in this like 30, 40-year period. And a lot of analysts and academics, again, they acknowledge that like one of the initial primary reasons why we couldn't really predict the Arab Spring coming, or the uprisings, whatever you call, coming, and that we cannot really tell like how things would develop from the uprisings in Syria, in Egypt. They admit that they didn't know those because they didn't know militaries. And in Syria, if we knew that like the nature of the military, then probably we could predict that the Assad regime wouldn't fall like that fast. So they admit that, and then from like I think 2011 until now, we have many studies, like beginnings, short kind of studies, but still we have now interest in the militaries. But these studies, like, because it has been only like 3 years, maybe about 3 years, these pieces are short. They are mostly published in newspapers or like in media, like appearances and so on. They're usually like superficial for now. They compare so many countries, but really not with without really like much knowledge about these cases. And the comparisons they make, some of them make, at least like scholars and academics, they make those comparisons with like little number of cases. They compare Egypt and Algeria, so on and so forth, like that, with 2 cases and so on. So what I'm trying to do, and this my presentation is actually based on my ongoing dissertation about the military influence in Muslim majority countries. So this paper, like this presentation, is my like initial observations about how military influence is set and maintained in the Middle East, in Muslim majority countries actually. Because in my dissertation I also focused on Malaysia. I bring in Pakistan as well, so I shouldn't really say like Middle East. When I say, so again, like what I'm trying to do is not try to explain why Pervez Musharraf deposed Nawaz Sharif in 1999 in Pakistan. That's not my concern. My concern is military influence in Pakistan, which has been going on from pretty much the beginning of the independence of Pakistan, or right after Jinnah died, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. One issue that I need to explain is how do I measure military influence? So how do I know there's a military influence in a country? And I have 4 indicators here. For example, if there's a coup d'etat, obviously, or coup attempt, then for me that's an indicator of military influence in that country. But one mistake that is done in civil military relations literature is that if you take coup attempts or coups or military interventions or military takeovers, whatever you call them, and there's usually a detail in, like, if you call a coup military intervention, that's kind of like a soft, taking it softly. If you say coup, that's like a more like ideological or like that, like harsh condemnation of the attempt. The mistake is that if you take coup only, like as an indicator of military influence, then you may miss, like in some countries there are no coups, but military exerts influence, like for a decade or so and so on. And the second indicator is that do officers take part or like interfere with elections, or do they show one presidential candidate, for example? And that's, for example, when like Algerian army usually picks who would be the president. And like if you want to be president in Algeria, you cannot do that without the consent of the Algerian army. That's like, so they involve in those processes. And the third one is when there's a disagreement between civilians and soldiers, who wins? Who prevails? Think about like a security policy or like a rapprochement with India in Pakistan. And like happens today, if the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif wants to get closer with India, but the army doesn't want, and if army wins and there's no rapprochement, then there's a military influence, obviously, because like civilians cannot get, like they are not able to decide. And the last indicator is whether the militaries, like they shirk their obligations, duties, but are left unpunished. For example, you, like as a civilian president or like prime minister, whatever the system in a certain country, you appoint or you like sack or dismiss a general, but the army doesn't accept that. For example, in Pakistan in 1999, just right before the coup, Nawaz Sharif dismissed Pervez Musharraf. The Pakistani army didn't accept it. They didn't accept it. They backed Pervez Musharraf deposing Nawaz Sharif. So that's an indicator. Like how come the military can reject the prime minister's decision or the cabinet's decision, whatever. So that's again another indicator. So what happens when they disagree, militaries and civilians? From now on, let me just briefly talk about civil military relations literature. There is the usual focus in civil military relations literature is on explaining single instances, like I said in the beginning. So they try to explain why Turkish army overtook in 1980, or Algerian army took over like in 1992 and cancelled the presidential the election, general elections. Even when they do so, like focus on single instances of military intervention, there are usual suspects that are repeated, like suspects, I mean usual suspects, I mean like factors of military interventions, like reasons of military interventions. And those factors or the causes are repeated all over again. Like in every single article and book you will see, is there an internal threat or external threat? You will see like whether political culture is low or high, or you would like see they claim either like there's a low political culture in one country that causes military to intervene, or they talk about like if civilians are like weak or corrupt, that they ask military leaders, generals to come in and take over the power. So those is like, you will see them all the time. Like there is no article that doesn't talk about this very much. Either the combination of these or like one of them, two of them. But to me, I think like trying to explain only like a single instance of military intervention in, for example, in 1999 in Pakistan, that's a futile business. Like, of course it's valuable, but the Pakistani army's military influence in politics does not begin there, does not end there. Like it comes like way before. Like it begins way before. So to explain, like that's my like initial. These are my initial observations. Like when I was reading about like Algeria, Tunisia, Pakistan, and Egypt, and even Malaysia, what I am noticing day by day is that we need to bring the state formation back in. We need to go back to how these states are formed to be able to explain the ongoing military influence in those countries. For example, like as a criticism of those like factors that many academics and scholars talk about in their pieces on civil-military relations, let me just say, like they say, for example, popular support. They focus on that as a cause of military interventions, for example. But does popular support cause the military to come in and take over power? I don't think so. Like they don't come in take over power because people support them. That's not a cause, but that's an enabling factor that enables militaries perhaps come in because they allow them. Or maybe if civilians ask, if civilians cooperate, like as happened in Egypt, I think in July 3 coup, if civilian politicians don't say anything, if they cooperate with the military leaders, then they may allow the military come in, but that doesn't explain why they did exactly. So there's a difference between a how question and the why question. And that's why I'm trying to like bring in the one generalizing factor, which is state formation, like how these countries are formed in the first place. But before I go there, let me say like my method is obviously like a comparative method. I use that, and I compare like Algeria, Pakistan, Egypt, Malaysia too, and like these are Muslim majority countries, and they have like I'm talking about like a 50-year period overall, and they have experienced some kind of like political pluralization, democratization too, like in some ways. Obviously, like Malaysia, you may have objections about if it's a semi-democracy, democracy, and so on, but they have at least like experienced some sort of like pluralization. And if I begin, like if I bring this information back in, like I'm talking about, if that particular military achieved its independence through an independence war or not. Like Malaysia, they didn't have an independence war. They basically, and like United Malay National Organization, UNO, they basically like compromised with the British. British wanted the Indians and the Chinese like living in Malaysia to have a say, and then the Malaysians first objected, but then compromised with them, and then it was all civilians that led to the independence. There was no independence war, no general, no commander, and today, from then on, we don't have any commander in, like ruling commander in Malaysia. We don't have any coup attempt. There's no coup. There's no military intervention. Nothing at all. And if you, for example, like there are internal threats in Malaysia too. There have been riots. There have been like communist insurgency. They had a like skirmish with Indonesia too, but the army didn't come in. So if security threats, for example, like internal threats are the cause of military interventions, why did Malaysian army not come in? So again, like similarly, Tunisia too. But so it's not only independence war though. Like there's an independence war, but how this independence war is fought. Like if there's a one leader coming out of that independence war, like Bourguiba in Tunisia, or if there's a movement like FLN, like National Liberation Front in Algeria, and if there's a disagreement or like a breakup in that movement in Algeria, even today, like if you follow the news between Khalid Nezar and Chadli Benjedi, like former president, there is a disagreement between them. Like one of them says, and that goes back to the FLN, like the National Liberation Front in the beginning. Khalid Nezar, like some of those independence movement, within the independence movement, it was led by commanders, but some of the commanders deserted from the French army and joined in the movement, and some of them were there from the beginning in 1954. And some of them, some of those commanders now say, well, you weren't there in the beginning, and then the others say, well, so what? So there's that disagreement between them. And then right after the Algerian independence in 1962, like one of the leaders, Dambella, is the president, and like he's almost a colleague. Like they fought together. The Boumediene is 1965. He deposed other commander, and he took over. So how independence? So two factors, I think. If there's an independence war, and then if there is a conflict, or if the independence war is led by one general, like happened in Tunisia, or if there's a split within the movement, or the nature of the movement matters as well, I think. And I should end it. If you have questions, maybe in the Q&A session I can elaborate and we can discuss. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And now our second speaker is Deniz Güvercin, and he will talk about alternative approach to understanding persistence of autocracies in the Middle East. Game, theoretic approach.
Actually, I'm not a political scientist, I'm an economist. I'm doing PhD in economics, and all my background is economics, and my master in economics and economics. So, in my PhD, I'm trying to do something on politics, which I am not very familiar with, so it's a very tough job for me. So, what I am trying to do here is on figuring out how to solve the puzzle of persistence of autocracies in the Middle East. As you know, it is in particular after 1990s, which is called as third wave democracy. Although in all sides of the world, including Latin America, Eastern Europe, and Sub-Saharan Africa, there has been big wave and big movement towards democratic transition and consolidation. However, in Middle East, there has not been any transition, democratic transition. Even there has been democratization attempts. So I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to figure out what is the main reason, or what we can say about this problem. I'm trying to approach the problem by using strategic interaction between agents. One is government here, and it is regime, authoritarian regime, and another one is civil society organization. And as you know, that civil society organization in the Middle East, the Islamic civil society organizations are the main civil society organizations. So I am trying to model the strategic interaction between these two actors, political actors, so to understand the reasons behind persistent authoritarianism in the Middle East. So by approaching the problem, I need to firstly give the theoretical background and what are the contexts these agents interact, and what are the political, social, economic contexts they interact, and what is the dynamics these two agents approach each other and solve the problem, and the equilibrium we see as authoritarianism, persistent authoritarianism. So by just jumping to those important civil society organization, I will try to give importance of these organizations in the Middle East. These organizations not just has a mission, like advocacy, and setting up the communication channels to pressure the government, to put pressure on the regime, such as publicizing the corruption or publicizing the bad governing or bad ruling. In Middle East, beyond these tasks, civil society organizations substitute the government. How they do this? Because especially in economic crisis and political crisis times, these organizations provide public good, such as education, such as social security, such as all type of charity functions they make. They provide food, accommodation, and so when the state cannot function well and collapse or fell into crisis, political economic crisis, these organizations come and they make the regime's states tasks. So these organizations somehow provides public good, which is very important for survival of the regime and society as a whole. So there are, beyond this information, there are lots of work on this, work on the persistence of autocracies in the Middle East. So they focus from different point of view. So some authors, scholars focus on the oil revenue. So if the oil wealth because oil wealth is too much, especially in, for example, Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, so these countries can buy off the social dissatisfaction, political dissatisfaction. But how about Egypt or countries which does not depend on oil revenue? So, for example, here, so Egypt, Tunisia, they are not. Their economy not depends on oil revenue, but they stay stuck in autocracy. So, other is Islamic legacy or Islamic legacy or tribal lineage. So, if family is important, like Saud family or Al Sabah family in Kuwait, Hashemites in Jordan, so they can legitimize their power because of their distance, their skindness, or tribal lineage. But as I said before, there are some republics, not monarchs, which does not depend on this kind of lineage, and they are still autocracies. And this goes on and on, and Islamic legacy like Morocco or Saudi Arabia, which is, they say, he is the Haramain, I forget the Arabic name, Haramain, or in Morocco it's same. I mean, they have different symbols, Islamic symbols they use for legitimation. But there are other countries like Tunisia or Algeria. They don't have this kind of lineage or Islamic symbolism in effect for persistent authoritarianism. And some people say because oil-producing countries, female labor is less supplied less, so woman is not connected very well with workplace, so they cannot get in the social relations, so they become more subordinated. This is another point of view. So it goes on and on. Some scholars, I don't have to explain and criticize all the points the scholars made about this persistent sense of autocracy in the region, but they all criticized in the literature itself, and they don't have complete and consistent answer for the persistence of autocracy in the region. So, what I am trying to do, as I said before, I am trying to model the strategic interaction between important agents, because political parties are co-opted, and regime can easily manipulate the political sphere of the society. They are not as important as civil society organizations. As I said before, Islamic organizations are very effective in the region because they use Islamic dynamism in their speech. So, when, for example, in Saudi Arabia, the constitution says the Sharia is the Islam is the religion of the state, but this is not sufficient. The governing, the ruling must be based on Islamic principles purely. So maybe symbolically they attach to Islam, or they put this in their constitution. It doesn't mean they based their ruling on Islamic principles. So Islamic society uses this as a dynamics to connect with society. So and this rhetoric connects perfectly with their public good provision. So they connect with society in well manner. So they are. I am trying to say they are the main, one of the main, maybe main effective actor determining the equilibrium, which is a persistent autocracy. So another actor is regime. So there are some studies using strategic interaction. One is Przorsky model, but this model does not model the liberalization period by period that I'm trying to do here. Not same type of modeling. He has hardliners and softliners. So, and softliners trying to gain leverage against the hardliners, so they open the political and social spheres, and after democratization starts, they look if they need to repress or not. So this is the Przorsky model. I model differently from the model. My model actually based on this idea, if they broaden their social base, they get rid of internal and external pressures. External pressures coming from foreign powers, such as US. So it imposes on some restrictions, like you need to do this liberalizations, policies. And it connects their contribution and their help, foreign help, or foreign aid in foreign aid form. We can think in this way. So, if you cannot make this kind of democratic reforms, so I will not give you foreign aid, kind of restriction. So this and the internal, this is external pressure, and internal pressure, public and political public dissatisfaction, so rising public dissatisfaction, and also public good, as I said before, civil society organization provide. This also create the gain for regime. If regime opens, then they can get external aid, foreign aid in the form of foreign aid, and they can get public good from civil society organizations. So this creates gains. So this creates motivation for further reform. Anyway, so civil society organization, if they can get organized, can attack to regime, not just on rhetoric or just on discourse. They can also attack on regime physically. So this also motivates regime to sophisticate the channels of legitimation. So regime also uses same channel. For example, if organization says we are not based on Islamic principles, they use, for example, in Egypt, Al-Azhar to create another channel for legitimization. So this is players. So actions types, we have two types for radical and moderate. Radicals trying to overthrow the regime, moderate loyal to regime. So there is limited liberalization here, and they can limitedly open the political spheres. It means that civil society cannot solve the collective action problem. So if they cannot solve the problem, there will not be uprising against the regime. So in this point, I call C. R means it's better. So in the beginning, regime decides whether to open or status quo, keep status quo. If they open, organized come and thinks if they organize or stay out. If they stay out, the game ends. So there will not be further actions because they open the political spheres and social spheres, but they don't organize. So it's just liberalized autocracy. And if they organize, and the regime decides whether to keep this limited liberalization. If they keep limited liberalization, it would be costly because it needs to monitor and observe the actions of organization. Organization should not solve the collective action problem and should not uprise against the regime. So that's the broadened authoritarianism. And if they take back all the rights, it goes back to, the status quo, because it will be violent and it will, there will be cost to take back the rights. It will be narrow authoritarianism. And if a regime decides, no, I will not take back or I will not keep this liberalization as it is, I will further liberalize the spheres, I will further open the politics and society, politics for these organizations further. So there will be two results here. Civil society decides whether to uprise or organize. If they organize, they will reach this cooperative authoritarianism. We call this as cooperative authoritarianism, such as in Morocco. Regime can create loyals, so they will not uprise. Against the regime. They will cooperate with the regime. If they choose uprise, the result will be revolution or narrow authoritarianism. It depends on the cost. If the revolution is very costly, they will not choose the revolution. So there are two types here actually. Moderate types, as we said, loyals and radicals. Radicals has different payoff than moderates, because radicals try to overthrow the regime. Their utility depends on the because they cannot get privilege from the regime, such as loyals. They have different strategy and payoff structure, because they don't connect it with regime. They will get revolution from revolution, higher payoff. So they choose revolution, and it depends on some parameters. It depends on some inequality between parameters. If, for example, 1 minus q minus this lambda is greater than c, it means that the cost is less than the gain, so they will choose revolution here. But because regime knows this, they will choose revolution. They will not choose further liberalization. They keep limited liberalization, such as in Jordan or Tunisia. So because regime knows that they are radicals, and if they open the political scene, they will make revolution. So they keep limited the further open the. So other equilibrium is this, and other equilibrium, for example, in this keep status quo is status quo authoritarianism, which means that it is very costly for authoritarian government to open, very costly, such as in Saudi Arabia, because in Saudi Arabia the family is very connected to tribal leaders. Actually, connection with marriage or other things, they are connected. If there is any kind of repression against these leaders or civil society, it will be very costly for reconstruction and so on. So they will not open the political scene, because T is very very large here. C minus T. So it's corresponds. And there is another. The model complicates when the regime cannot differentiate between two types, radical and moderate. Cannot differentiate. For example, in Egypt, after Nasser period, regime opens the political spheres for civil society to organize. But because in this period, civil society or the Muslim Brotherhood declares that they are now becoming closer to regime. Regime thinks that they become moderate. So the equilibrium, this depends on the equilibrium. So because the probability of moderate is very high in the belief, in the mind of Egyptian authority, they open the political and social spheres. And this result as narrow dictatorialship. And they further repress the Muslim Brotherhood. They further repress the Brotherhood because Brotherhood cannot make revolution in this period. I have lots of things to say. I think I finished my... Okay. So what I'm trying to do is trying to map the different authoritarian regimes, different types of authoritarian regimes in the Middle East by using strategic interaction that game theory provides us. So depending on the type of the civil society organization and cost of the liberalization and the revolution, the authoritarian government opens or closed the political spheres.
And now our third speaker is Abdul-Wahab. She will talk about Iranian nuclear crisis and its regional repercussions.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me this opportunity to present my paper. I will present today the Iranian nuclear crisis and its regional repercussions. The Iranian nuclear program is considered the most complex and intricate issue in the nuclear proliferation problem. This is because of the raised dimensions and question about Iranian nuclear intentions, which represents a real problem in the issue of nuclear proliferation in general, where the Iranian situation offered a model in this regard. Since the opening of the Iranian nuclear file, the ambiguity of Tehran's intention may be the only constant in the case, despite what is declared from the Iranian side. However, the uncertainty of the facts and non-intention also represent a real problem in the case of Iran. The American and Western indicator in general refers to the activities of Iran, of Iranian nuclear as a non-peaceful one, while there is no practically supported evidence of such a claim of acquisition. Therefore, it's difficult to determine the paths that are likely to turn this crisis to in the time that the developments of the crisis is still arguably interacting in a way that is opening the possibility of all scenarios, especially after the recently imposed international sanctions that are representing a further pressure on Iran. The Iranian issue is taking a higher level of interest in both international and regional context and raise fear from the military escalation and is still requiring a great deal efforts and political interactions in order to decide the negative repercussion. The behavior of most of the parties to this crisis aims at protecting their own interests and current along with working as much as possible to avoid getting into the midst of a military confrontation. This study aimed to identify the nature of Iranian nuclear program by analyzing its stage of immersion, then analyzing the motives that lay behind Iran's quest to acquire nuclear weapons. After that, the study moved to determine the strategic repercussions of Iranian nuclear program, then analyzing the developments of Iranian nuclear crisis. Then we moved to identify the international effort which exerted to manage the Iranian nuclear crisis. We will investigate why this effort could fail. Finally, the study will show the future scenario of Iranian nuclear. First, Iranian nuclear program phases. The Iranian nuclear program started in the 1950s when Iran seek a nuclear power plant for peaceful purpose, and this stage ended at 1978 1979 by the rise of Iranian Islamic Revolution. Then the second phase, while the Islamic Revolution erupted in Iran, there is some ignorance happened toward these nuclear ambitions. Then, by 1985, there is some interest, partial interest in continuing what started before the Islamic Revolution, and especially when the Iranian-Iraqi war. Okay, then by the collapse of Soviet Union and the end of Cold War, there is an intense interest. Iran revived nuclear power plant construction and begins a clandestine enrichment program. Then, the last stage, Iranian nuclear program becomes an international issue. Then, now we will move to the second point of my research, which is the causes and factors that stimulate, that lays behind Iranian quest for nuclear capability. I will investigate three main causes. The first one comes from international environment. The second one from regional environment. The third one would be internal environment. Iran was suffered regarding the first factor. Iran was suffered from isolation imposed by great power, especially United States since its Islamic Revolution. Also, when Iran started to deal or to continue what she started before the revolution, the international community imposed some sanction due to its nuclear ambition. Regarding the regional environment, as you know, Iran, before its Islamic Revolution, seek to be a regional power in the Middle East. Okay, and after its Islamic Revolution and after the invasion removal of Saddam Hussein regime. This has given the Islamic Republic the opportunity to strengthen its regional power at the expense of other regional power. Iran can use this at that time. It's used this change in the regional balance for its interests by using Iraq to achieve its foreign policy with other countries, as what is going on Lebanon when Iran uses Hezbollah party to achieve its policy. In addition, the changes that happened in Iraq by shifting the power from Sunni leaders to Shia rulers gave Iran the opportunity to use the Arab Iraqi Shia's power to influence Arab Shia population in other countries, especially Gulf states. Iran, since its Islamic Revolution, proposing many proposals for securing the Gulf, which were not accepted by Gulf countries and by Iraq during Saddam era. But in fact, the Iranian rule facing a dilemma, and this dilemma has two dimensions. One is conventional dilemma and existed since the occupation of Iraq, and it deepened by the Arab Spring. The other is created by regional changes driven by the Arab Spring. Regarding the first one, the conventional rule is caused by the lack of regional legitimacy. The practice of Iran's rule have not gained the required legitimacy from Gulf states countries, Egypt and United States. Iran's practice deepened the division of the Arab countries into two main pillars, the moderate and the radical. The former is represented by Egypt, Gulf country, Jordan, and recently Yemen, supported by the United States. The latter is represented by Iran and its allies and proxies. These pillars were not translated into institutions, but into summits and coordination of policies between parties. Arab countries used this strategy to balance and to contain the Iranian influence in some areas, namely Iraq, Palestine, Bahrain, and Yemen. The Iranians used it to exert more influence in the region and to prove to the United States that they are the player that controls security and stability in the region. As a result, the region has become divided along the Shia-Sunni lines. This divide for some countries like Gulf state countries is more like a threat that has the potential to blow up their societies from inside. Besides, Iranian policy increased the influence of the religious non-state actors in the region, as Al-Mahdi army and other Shia militia become a crucial factor in achieving stability in Iraq, and the houses becomes one of the security concerns not only to Yemen but to Saudi Arabia and Oman. Those entities are hard to deal with or to predict their behavior because they are non-state actors. The second dimension of Iran's rule dilemma is its inability to practice its rule as it used to do before the Arab Spring. There are three main strategies that constitute Iran's rule practice. First, maintaining its network of Shia proxies and operating in order to ensure its dominance over the Arab region, a strategy that emanates from its indirect aggressive policies practiced since the eruption of Islamic Revolution. Second, Iran is building its network of allies in the region beyond Syria. Iran propagated its image the protector of Palestinians and the supporter of Islamic resistance, and being an enemy of Israel, the Great Satan. It established a coalition with Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command. This was stressed in a statement of Khatami, who said that Iran had a natural right, if not a shared national obligation, Palestinians facing. Also, the ongoing conflict in Syria puts Iran's network under pressure as replacing Assad with anti-Iran elite within its strategic alliance with Syria. This conflict motivates Hamas to move in. The political projects proposed by Iran in order to gain legitimacy for its practices and rules already played through its proxies and allies. It's not supported by main country in the region. So, according to the rule theory, having a project accepted by other countries in the region is necessary for gaining legitimacy for playing any role. The third motive comes from internal environment. As you know, the power structure in Iran, the Vilayet Faqih, is an important institution in Iranian political system and it plays a significant role in decision-making process of the country. The supreme leader has constitutional power to challenge the decision of executive presidency as he is the #1 figure in the country. In fact, the president is the second most powerful official in the Islamic Republic of Iran, but his influence is primarily over the social, culture, and economic policies of the country, but not foreign policy. Iranian foreign policy has experienced many changes in its foreign behavior since its revolution. Okay, this is the main driver of Iran's foreign policy compared. We have revolution in Islam, geopolitics, nationalism, ethnicity, economics. Then we move to the role of Iranian president regarding the nuclear issue. First, the Rafsanjani role. While the nuclear program was reactivated at 1986 at the height of the Iran-Iraqi war, largely confirming this institution, since then the program has been marked by the persistence rather than urgency, and the absence of a crash program would suggest the motive for investing in a nuclear option stem more from political than security imperatives. Second, the Khatami rule under Khatami presidency, major developments took place with regard to the nuclear program, with Khatami voluntary suspension of uranium enrichment-related activity and the acceptance of the Non-Proliferation Treaty Additional Protocol in 2003. Khatami adopted reform program constituted a great challenge for the entrenched leadership and also represents a direct threat to the ideological foundations of the Islamic Republic. Ahmadinejad rule is populous in trust of the nuclear program, although not necessarily increasing his weight in the decision-making process, landed him in the position of the de facto spokesman or leading political personality on nuclear-related matter. Ahmadinejad made it clear that he would fight for the right of the Islamic Republic to develop a nuclear program. Ahmadinejad's nuclear policy would find strong support from the supreme leader and from conservatives inside and outside parliament. In his support of the nuclear policy, Khamenei said using nuclear technology is a national obligation and a public demand, and going back is the same as losing the country's independence at a very high price. The Islamic Republic tendency to exploit a foreign policy issue for domestic political gain would reasserted itself with Ahmadinejad's presidency. President Ahmadinejad has attempted to exploit and manipulate the nuclear issue in two distinct but interrelated ways. First, President Ahmadinejad has attempted to exploit the nuclear issue in an attempt to and manufacture a crisis with the West, thereby renewing the populist long-held feeling of embezzlement. Second, there has been concentrated dominated by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. And he also crafted a new nuclear negotiation team, and he succeeded in making a draft for a new nuclear deal with the West after a long period of time for postponing the negotiation with the West. Then I will move to the third. Is it right? So, what? Could I say at the conclusion? Or? Okay. This is the development of Iranian nuclear crisis. Okay. And then the regional repercussion of Iranian crisis. And then the conclusion. This paper concludes the following: in Iranian nuclear program since 2003 become a peaceful one. The American position toward Iran shifted to engaging a mutual deal that has never been about stopping nuclear proliferation, but rather about the reintegration of Iran in the region. If this negotiation with Iran go to the same way as they have lately, the West might experience in 2 years' time a shift towards a more open and diverse relationship with Iran. This openness might be regarded as a positive development by the United States of Europe, while other neighboring countries in the Middle East, especially in the Middle East, might perceive it as a long-lasting threat, a disruptive effect in the regional balance of the last 30 years. The fact remains that the entire process currently taking place in Syria still revolves around Iran's nuclear program. And the last point, this is the last point, it's important to observe the current situation in Iraq and Syria and see how regional powers as well as international powers respond to the political developments in Iraq and Syria, because that will help us to see how this event affects the Islamic Republic and how the Islamic Republic responds to the political development in both countries as well as to international interventions in Iraq. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Now our final speaker is Eduardo Abdulrahman. He will talk about the evolution of Lebanese and Syrian state-to-state relations.
Thank you very much. In my presentation or my paper, I will not be discussing the relation of the Syrian state with non-state Lebanese actors like political parties or paramilitary organizations. There has been a lot of work done on this subject, but I am more concerned on the Lebanese and Syrian state-to-state relations. This is a subject that has not been discussed greatly by scholars. According to my paper, I could classify the Lebanese and Syrian state-to-state relation into 3 classifications. The first one from 1943 until the early 1960s. This was a stage characterized by the fact that the 2 states had a fellowship and brotherhood cooperation. The second stage was from the 60s until 2005, and I describe it as the Ba'ath superiority complex towards Lebanon, by which the Ba'ath senior regime at that time was trying and succeeded in controlling all aspects of life in Lebanon. The third stage was after 2005, and that's when the Lebanese were planning and kind of succeeded in regaining their sovereignty over Lebanon from Syria. Now, let me discuss the first stage, which is brotherhood and cooperation. In this stage, the Lebanese and Syrians were still colonized by France. The Lebanese and Syrian governments worked together as a united front to gain independence from France. In 1943, the French imprisoned Lebanese leaders because they deleted all articles in the constitution that gives reference reference to the French mandate. At that time, after the imprisonment of the Lebanese leaders, Syrians went to the street in support of what the Lebanese did, and eventually, with the political intervention of Great Britain, independence was granted to Lebanon and subsequently to Syria also. Directly after independence, when President Charles Khouli, the first Lebanese president after independence, visited Syria, he was proclaimed by the Syrian elites and newspapers as being an honest man, a national man. National is very important because at that time Syrian elites were perceiving the Christians of Lebanon in a way or another as being more inclined to be Western rather than Arabs or nationals. On similar lines, the Syrian elites also described Riyad al-Sulh, the first prime minister in Lebanon after independence, to be as a jihadi man who worked for the struggle of Lebanon. But again, the word jihadi in this term at that time was described from a national perspective, not from a religious perspective. Now, the two countries worked together and worked hard to gain independence, but this doesn't mean that there were no problems afterwards. There were economical problems, mainly, and not political problems. One of the economical issues that the two states had to deal with after independence was the fact that the revenues of Syria and Lebanon were not separated for the Lebanese state, one for the Lebanese state and one for the Syrian state. It was combined, and then the French would decide to which country to give the revenue. So the first thing the Lebanese and the Syrians did was to decide on a HCCI, a higher transfer of common interest, by which the Lebanese and the Syrians would deal with the revenues from taxes of imports and exports, from taxes of the mail system, from the airport, from the trains, etc. And subsequently they will decide on how to provide the revenues for each of the governments. The second thing they dealt with was the monetary issue. At this stage, there was still a central bank for Syria and Lebanon, but when Lebanon decided to have a monetary agreement with Syria by fixing, with France, by fixing the Lebanese lira to the franc, to the French monetary system, the Syrians disagreed with that. So each state decided both states actually decided to dismantle the central bank, and each state had to create its own central bank. And finally, there was the issue of the custom union. The custom union between Syria and Lebanon were presented as one custom union, but in 1950, the Prime Minister of Syria presented to the Lebanese government the choice of whether they would be interested in having full economical unity with Syria. At that time, the Lebanese rejected, so it was agreed that both states would dismantle the common custom union, and each would create its own. Now, evaluating this era, it is obvious that both states faced little problems. All of the problems actually were economic and not political. At the political level, there were no confrontation between Lebanon and Syria, as Syria respected the Lebanese sovereignty and independence, and it was institutionalized in the Alexandria Protocol when the founding members of the Arab League signed a document by which they agreed that all founding members would respect the independence and sovereignty of each other country. That protocol included Lebanon and Syria, of course, and it made clear that Syria would not have any claims over Lebanon. Now, regarding the next stage, it was, according to what I wrote, it's basically described as the superiority complex. In this area, the Ba'athists in Syria were trying to regain control of Lebanon and integrate it in a way or another to Syria. Let me explain here something important about the Ba'ath ideology. According to the founding fathers of Ba'athism, mainly Michel Aflaq and Salah ad-Din Bitar, they believe that, actually it's Article 1 of the Ba'ath ideology. It says that the Arabs form one nation from the Atlantic up till the Red Sea, which means that all the countries from, including North Africa, the Middle East, the Gulf, until Iraq. Of course, they wanted Damascus to be the center of this Arab world, because at that time it was believed that Damascus was the beating heart of Arab nationalism. Now, by advancing this ideology, it was clear that Lebanon had, according to Syrian calculations, the Ba'athists, Lebanon had no sovereignty, no independence. So they were just something that the Syrians used to refer to Lebanon as Qutb, or province, according to the Ba'ath ideology. When Assad consolidated power in the 70s, he made it clear that Lebanon is integrated into Syrian national interest, that is in military and political terms. He exploited the Ba'athist ideology in order to control all aspects of life in Lebanon, which he succeeded to do in the subsequent years. He used to support one Lebanese group against the other, and this allowed him to send his army in 1976. It was sent in the disguise of the Ortadoğu'da Arabiya, or the Arab Deterrence Force. Later on, the Syrian army were engaged in a series of assassinations against opposing leaders to the Syrian intervention in Lebanon. At this stage, Lebanon was not but a battleground for Syria in order to have a proxy war against Israel. We know at that time Syria has lost the Golan Heights, so in order to press their demands over the Golan Heights, Lebanon was used as a bargain chip in order to regain what the Ba'athist regime lost in the Golan. Now, this will lead me to the third stage of the Lebanese-Syrian state-to-state affairs, and that is when Lebanon had succeeded in obliging Syria to withdraw from its land after international, after the UN basically passed the 1559 United Nations resolution obliging Syria to withdraw its troops from Lebanon. In this stage, of course, as you all know, Hariri was assassinated, the prime minister. Before his assassination by a few months, he went to Syria to talk to President Bashar al-Assad and to try to convince him that choosing Emin Lahoud, the president at that time, for another 3 years would be catastrophic for Lebanon, for Syria. But President Assad at that time perceived Hariri's inclination to refuse his orders as kind of an insult for him. So literally he told him that if you think that you can break my words in Lebanon, I would rather break Lebanon on your head and on the head of Iraq and your allies rather than break my word. So this explains the superiority complex of the Ba'athists towards the Lebanese politicians and the Lebanese state in general. After the withdrawal of the Syrian army, there were also a series of assassinations, mainly conducted by Syrian military intelligence, up until the Syrian crisis. It was obvious that Syria would be threatening and even assassinating Lebanese politicians to oppose any role for Syria and Lebanon. Now I conclude by saying that the Lebanese and Syrian state-to-state relations fluctuated from brotherhood and cooperation into exploitation. The only thing to have genuine relations from state to state, based on respect, based on accepting the sovereignty of each other and the independence of the other. That's by having a democratic government in Syria. That is by eradicating Bashar al-Assad's regime and Fascism and substituting it with a democratic government based on democratic principles. Thank you very much.
Any question? Identify the speaker you are asking. Okay.
My question will be Maristan. Unfortunately, I missed your presentation, but you said something, and my question will be based on military intervention in Egypt. Some experts claim that despite military intervention against post-elected President Morsi, now Egypt is more stable than other countries, for example, Iraq, Syria. So I'm curious that what do you think about this situation? That is it stable or more unstable in Egypt? Thank you.
Well, that argument, coups or military interventions bring stability, is pretty much the principal argument that is used to justify military intervention and coups. Like it was used in Turkey too. Like if you Turkish people and other people too, they would remember it in 1980 and so on. Like the main argument, they're the same. Like before 1980, the years of 1970s was a chaos and so on, people killing each other on the streets and so on and so forth. And then the army came in and everything ended. It's stability. But to me, the short period of about 1 year that President Morsi ruled, was it chaos? Was it people killing each other? It's pretty, to me, that period of 1 year before Mohamed Morsi was deposed really resembles what happened in Turkey in the 1970s. How come the whole lines for gas stopped in 1 day in Egypt? So the stability, I think, is there. You may easily be deceived or you may easily be get tricked by that semblance of stability that is now in Egypt. I don't think it is going to be stable. The stability right now, I don't think it's gonna stay for long, because I don't think that the Gulf support for the military government right now is going to continue forever, and without that, I don't think the Egyptian economy will continue like this, like it is today, for a long time. So I don't think it's the stability right now. Stability is going to stay. To me, that's fine.
I would like to thank all speakers. I have a question for Rania. Rania, there are two basic ways to end the tension between the states. The first one is the war, and the second one is diplomacy. And under diplomacy, we have a specific title, which is nuclear diplomacy. And the great example is the Cold War. During the Cold War, United States and Soviet Russia had nuclear weapons, and that's why they didn't fight, because they know the fight means zero-sum game. Both of sides is gonna be losers because both of sides had nuclear weapons. Right now in the Middle East, there's a tension between the Israel and the Iran. Do you think the Iran should have nuclear weapons to have a balance of power in the Middle East, and there's gonna be nuclear diplomacy to that between Israel and Iran, or Iran shouldn't have nuclear weapon never? What do you think?
Thank you for the question. I think, yes, we have a problem in the Middle East that Israel has a nuclear weapon, and sorry, and Iran was quest for nuclear capability, and Iran started to to have a nuclear weapon, and by 2003, Iran stopped all military aspects of its nuclear capability, and since that time, since 2003 till now, all reports and investigation that done by IAEA and and all the international reports refer to that the military aspect stopped since that. But your question, I think you asked for why, if I support that Iran should have a military or a nuclear weapon in order to make a balance between. This is your question, but the problem is Iran is live in the Middle East, and we surrounded by many of Arabian states, and the Iranian ambition is the Arabian state, whether Gulf states or other Arabian states, fear from that ambition because there is some fear from the Iranian intention. So I think we don't support Iran to have a military weapon, a nuclear weapon. But your question, I think you asked for if Iran and Israel have some compromise over that issue. In the nearest future, I don't think so, because they are totally different. Iran and Israel, I think they don't have a consent over that issue. Okay.
Okay, then I first have to do